Hey, business owners, we know you know the importance of maximizing every dollar. With the Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business American Express card, you can make your expenses work just as hard as you. From afternoon coffee runs to stocking office supplies and even team dinners, you can earn miles on all your business expenses. Plus, you can earn 125,000 bonus miles for a limited time through October 29th. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve Business Card. If you travel, you know. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply. Offer ends October 29th, 2025.
Shaq here, spinning fast-acting pain relief with Icy Hot. Ice works fast, heat makes it last. Icy Hot, you're so back.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, if I was ever trusted with starting this pod myself, I would start it a little bit early, just so the listeners could hear you counting me in, so they would understand why I'm chuckling at the start. Also, where are you, Kieran? This is a new location on me.
I've been moved offices at university, and I've started doing some sort of random thoughts, mind mapping on the wall next to me. So yes, it does look as if I'm in some sort of horror movie, and have been trying to work out the satanic rites of some solution or other.
There is an element of The Shining about it. It's very white shining about it. Also, I mean, that mind map, Kieran, God rest his soul, Stephen Hawking would be sitting there going, that's, I'm not entirely sure if I can get to the bottom of any of that, Kieran. But as we know, you have a very special mind.
Well, that's why, yes, 44 contributions to the Viz Profanosaurus. It's the combination of a 12-year-old schoolboy and a numbers nerd. The Venn diagram is actually quite small where they overlap.
That made me laugh so much last week when we were in Belfast. I can't remember what we were discussing, but I was saying how proud of all the things that you've done. And you remembered that you'd forgotten to tell me you had your 44th contribution. That's the thing that really, I've never seen the beaming smile so big. 44. I mean, it's a very funny contribution to the Profanosaurus, but yeah, the fact that you're still contributing to it should be a statue outside Viz headquarters.
I think there possibly is, but it might be of somebody else, such as Roger Melly or Sid the Sexist.
Roger Melly was funny. I'd love a statue of you outside Viz headquarters with a spreadsheet under one arm and a Swanee whistle under the other. So you make the sort of sound effect that Carry On Films used to make when Barbara Windsor bent down, as nurses always used to do, apparently, in the 70s. It's Newsday, Kieran. We're recording this on Tuesday, we need to point out, for openness and honesty, just in case a big story does come up. Although, as we know, if the Man City story does eventually come up, we will be dropping everything and doing an emergency pod. In the meantime, Kieran, there are some big stories. And the first three involve world football, essentially, world football and European football. We've spoken about the unease, the disquiet, the annoyance of FIFA's World Cup tickets, the fact that they've become their own touts, many things we've spoken about. And now Switzerland have stepped in, Kieran, which is not like them. They, historically they tend to keep out of things, but Switzerland have stepped in.
Yes, the financial authorities in Switzerland, a bit like the rest of the country, they are very conservative with a small c in their outlook, but they are also very thorough. And in this particular case, the Swiss Gambling Supervisory Authority has taken a look at the processes and the activities of FIFA. And they've not come out and say, we think you're a bunch of grifters, Gianni. But at the same time, they say that if we take a look at the FIFA right to buy tokens, and we highlighted this a year ago, FIFA started to put out these rather weird and wonderful tokens, and the take-up didn't seem huge, but it was still ticking along. I think it's raised around about $35 million. So clearly they've made a fair amount of financial success from it. And some of the tokens that they've been given out, some of them were just sort of digital shiny cards, which in theory you can trade. The vast majority of these are pretty worthless, because what exactly are you trading? And if you take a look at clubs that have put these out, the values have tended to collapse. But I think the main interest has been in what FIFA call the right to buy. You buy one of these shiny tokens, and that gives you a right to buy a ticket. Now, what FIFA didn't do is they didn't tell you, which matches necessarily. It would be a group game initially, and B, which tickets you could buy. Now, it subsequently turns out that you can effectively only really buy tickets in tiers 3 and 4, the two most expensive price categories. And if you've paid hundreds, even potentially thousands of dollars for this token, and you then have to go and pay another $200 or $300 to watch, I'm not trying to disparage the. Let's say it's Cape Verde versus Honduras. And first of all, congratulations to Cape Verde.
Yeah, of course.
Major chops to them. I'm absolutely delighted, and I do think that's one of the advantages of having an expanded World Cup, because you just to see the celebrations. And having been to Cape Verde, I'm absolutely delighted. The people who were buying these right to buy tickets, and again, I've got limited sympathy for them. They thought that they would be able to be touts themselves and sell these tickets on at a higher price. But by the time you've paid for your token and then have had to go and pay one of these top prices, the chances of you being able to flip that ticket and make a profit on it are relatively limited. But FIFA don't care, because they've already rinsed you twice. So there's that. But I think the reason why the Gambling Supervisory Authority have come out with this statement, the gambling services that are not licensed in Switzerland and are therefore illegal, they have concluded that what FIFA are doing is offering a gambling service. And this has always been one of the issues that I've had. If people want to spend money or whatever they want to spend, sort of the libertarian part of me says, go ahead, fill your boots. Provided it doesn't do you any harm or other people any physical harm, then it's up to you. But you have to be transparent. And I don't think there is transparency here. And what we also have seen is that FIFA have also, I believe, sold some right to buy tickets for the final. And you're thinking, hold on, there's an opportunity to make money here. But those rights to buy tickets, it turns out, are country related. So you pay, it'll probably cost you a few $1,000s. It'll cost you, say $999, and you get the right to buy a ticket for the final in one of the highest ticket price categories, but only if England make the final. And if England don't make the final, that $990. So that is a gamble. You are gambling on England or Argentina or Morocco or Cape Verde or wherever the country happens to be on getting to the final, and you pay this $999, plus you have to go and buy your ticket, and you then hope to be able to sell that at a higher price. And of course, if that country doesn't get to the final, then you've lost your money. I think the Swiss authorities are saying, well, actually, that's not a right to buy. That's a gamble. And as a consequence, they are going further. FIFA, of course, are declining to comment.
Yeah.
Gianni Infantino is too busy with saving the world. But today, Gianni, you look like a bit of a grifter, mate. Not for the first time.
I'm delighted that you've been to Cape Verde, Kieran, because as I was saying, the chap from the Cape Verde FA last week saying this puts us on the map, and I'm like most of us, we're still going, whereabouts? It's still hard to put. But a friend of mine lives in Geneva, and he said, I'm on about to say he's not going to sell many ice creams going at that speed, Kieran. One of the finest jokes ever.
That is brilliant.
That joke, that and the Glenda Jackson and the Cleopatra sketch, the high watermark of English comedy. A friend of mine lives in Geneva, and they use that horrible phrase "guest worker," don't they, when they're talking about immigrant workers? But he said where he is, a lot of the guest workers are from Cape Verde, and he said the celebrations were just absolutely fantastic, and that's where you go. The World Cup is a brilliant thing because it means so much to these people. But there's a couple of things here, Kieran, because it seems to me this right to buy. There's a difference, it seems, when you look at the small print between a right to buy and a guarantee to buy. And also, FIFA denied this when they introduced these right to buy. It's a cryptocurrency, essentially, is it not? And if it isn't, what is the difference between their right to buy lottery cards, which people are trading, and a cryptocurrency?
Well, the right to buy, to be fair, if you pay that initial fee, you are guaranteed the ability to buy a ticket before you know who the two teams are going to be. So that's the gambling element. And you then pay the amount that FIFA have now quoted for the ticket prices. And the increase since Qatar 2022 is substantial. They're arguing, well, America's a bigger country. There'll be lots of people going. Certainly when I've spoken to my peer groups, and I appreciate that it's a relatively limited size, the reaction to date is we ain't going. And these are lads that do a lot of following England around and so on. They just think the prices are indefensible. FIFA will argue if we sell all the tickets, they are defensible, and it's market forces and so on. It's not a cryptocurrency because it's a token, but it's a token which is linked to something which is outside of the control of the user. So it's within that sort of overall blockchain, crypto, NFTs, fan tokens, and they're all slightly different from one another, but they are all built on a belief that you will find another sucker to take them off you at a higher price. And it has to be said, with hindsight, I wish I'd bought into Bitcoin 10 or 15 years ago, and we've had Peter McCormack on this show, and he's done extremely well. But for every one Bitcoin, there's 1,000 failed cryptocurrencies, and for every successful fan token, there's 1,000 failed fan tokens. So it is in that sense a gamble, and it is a very high risk one.
I'm glad you said NFT because I couldn't work out whether this was fungible or non-fungible. So this is non-fungible, is it?
Yes.
Non-fungible. We've discussed this before, Kieran, but the ticket prices, you've got this strange anomaly now with the World Cup coming up in that some of it is taking place in Mexico, a genuine football-mad country with a football-mad population, most of whom will earn far less than the people of Canada and America and will be struggling to get tickets. People in Canada and America, God bless them, not football-mad.
Yes.
So the people more likely to get tickets, the people less likely to want to watch football. That's always been an issue, and we'll deal with that. But we won't deal with it. If we could deal with it, Kieran, that would be fantastic. But unfortunately, it's beyond anything you and I could do. I think even if we could locate a dark alley down which Gianni Infantino was going to go, he's probably got security So there's nothing we can do.
But we got Uncle Terry.
We have got Uncle Terry, with the threat of Uncle Terry. That might, yeah. It's the old days, Kieran. Back in even before this pod started, you had mentioned Juventus and other Italian teams, and you go, "Hello, what they've been up to," and then they've got all sensible and grown up. But then this week, thanks to UEFA, we're going, "Hello, what have Juventus been up to?"
Yes, yet again, I think, when it comes to Juventus, that they have been dealt with domestically. They have been banned from Europe before. It looks as if Juventus may be in breach of UEFA's cost control rules. They are now being assessed on the 3 years to 24-25. And by all accounts, there'll be an early conclusion of this. We'll find this out in early 2026. Premier League, take note. It is possible to do an investigation and get it sorted if you're efficient. And then once again, it goes back to I did have that fascinating conversation with one of our secret lawyers who said the Premier League just got too greedy. They wanted to be able to make this announcement. 115 charges. It sounds very grand. If they just concentrated on 10 key ones, A, they will have a greater chance of a victory, and B, the whole thing would have been resolved by now, and we would have moved on to something else, as opposed to having this cloud hanging over the head of Premier League football that we have at present. But as far as Juventus are concerned, they are allowed to lose up to £60 million over 3 years, or up to, €60 million, or if they've got some good habits, that can be increased to 90 million euros. And I think these good habits are something that perhaps the IFR, the independent regulator here in the UK, would benefit from taking notice of. Now, I'm not just saying that because when myself and Christina Philippou, when we did our research papers for the government a few years ago, we sort of listed these types of things. Is it a going concern as far as the auditors are concerned? Does it have a positive quick ratio, positive equity? Is debt repayable, and so on? These are all the types of things that as a person that likes cash, because I think cash is important to any business, this is sort of music to my ears. But it would appear that Juventus potentially are in breach of that. What will the penalties be? I think because we're under sort of a new raft of penalties as far as UEFA are concerned, then it's likely to initially be a fine, a squad restriction, what we've seen at Chelsea. And Chelsea did extremely well over the summer in terms of the players that they managed to move out of the club to satisfy the rules. So I don't think it's going to be banning from a competition, but I'm pretty impressed by what I'm seeing from UEFA. They seem to be very, very professional, and they're not scared of the big boys, and they are making up the rules as opposed to the clubs making up the rules. And again, I think that's a criticism that can be levelled at the Premier League, is that the rules themselves at the Premier League, because they are so full of loopholes, have become somewhat laughable.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree slightly with your assertion that UEFA have become very efficient and clever in the past few months, because there are some areas clearly in which they are still useless. We are massive fans on this pod, Kieran, of imaginative, non-violent protest. And normally they come from fans. In Spain this week, we saw an imaginative, non-violent protest from players.
That's correct. The Players' Union has responded to La Liga's decision to host a match in Miami between, as we know, Valencia and Barcelona, whoever it's going to be.
Well, it is Villarreal.
It is Villarreal.
Yeah.
Villarreal and Barcelona. And what the players did was that for the first 15 seconds of the match, they just stood there and did absolutely nothing. And there were also fan protests. Because I did think when we had the Super League proposals, the reaction of Spanish and Italian fans at the time appeared to be sort of bit more indifferent. Well, clearly, and German fans were very opposed to it. English fans were very opposed to it. But we saw from those two countries, is it bad? Is it good? But clearly, they don't like this. So they did this, and it was a token protest. It was a token protest that one would hope would have gathered attention and would have provoked debate. And I'm very, very sad to say that the TV cameras, which the Liga has signed a recent deal with a broadcaster in Spain, the TV cameras decided to focus on something else. And to me, this is quite Machiavellian. This is Big Brother. And it looks as if La Liga had spoken to the broadcasters and say, we're aware of this protest. We don't want this protest to be given any airtime. And therefore, will you go to the crowd, or will you take photographs of what's happening outside the ground and so on? And also, by all accounts, a lot of the fans were catcalling during this 15 seconds against to voice their protest, and the broadcasters blanked out the sound. Now, this is very, very concerning, because we are moving to a more of an authoritarian, dystopian world in terms of what can and cannot be said. And if it's now going to apply to peaceful, non-violent protests at football grounds from stakeholders in football, and by stakeholders, A, I mean the players, and B, I mean the fans, I think this is very, very poor by La Liga and sets a precedent. And where's this going to go in the future? And I'm always been sort of opposed to, is this the start of something far bigger? But in this particular instance, if we've now got the football authorities effectively dictating what can and cannot be shown at a football match and what can and cannot be heard at a football match, I don't think that's good for football.
This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by Football 360 Pro Series, an online course in football business and finance, which features our very own Kieran Maguire. On the course, you get 10 modules covering everything from football club financial statements to spending restrictions, financial analysis, and accounting for player transfers.
In other words, amortization. The content is broken down into easy-to-consume 15 minutes a day lessons featuring videos and quizzes. And on top of that, Pro Series features 6 weekly sessions with football industry experts, providing expertise and networking in an intimate online classroom environment. If you're looking to take your next step in the football industry, or even you're just an avid amortization curious football fan, Football 360 Pro Series is for you. Our students are all ages and all kinds of backgrounds, but they're united by one thing. They're all footy nerds.
I'm amortization curious. I might sign up for this, Kieran, especially as there's currently a 15% discount for Price of Football listeners when using the discount code POF2025. That's POF2025 for a 15% discount. The course is limited to 20 students, so book your place as soon as possible.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Finish training for the day? Time to fight post-workout fatigue with Core Power Protein Shakes. They're packed with 26 grams of high-quality protein to build muscle and electrolytes to help hydrate. The nutrition you need to help your body replenish, rebuild, and repair post-workout so you can power on to the next one. Champion your recovery with Core Power. Visit corepower.com to learn more.
we also had, I understand, some Spanish broadcasters and newspapers implying that the catcalling and the booing was against the players for stopping playing or for not playing for 15 seconds, which we understand isn't the case. That's part of the problem. That goes back to that the indifference you mentioned between Spanish and Italian fans about the Super League is because Spanish and Italian newspapers, sports papers, which are pretty much the mouthpiece of either the biggest clubs or the Italian-Spanish League, were ambivalent about it. They weren't condemning it the way that German newspapers and English newspapers were, so that the fans were probably taking their lead from that. And also, if you're a Real Madrid, Barcelona fan, you just expect to be playing in the biggest league in the world, whether that's called Super League or Champions League. The reason that it made me laugh that players refusing to move, because this is why I love English fans so much. If you were to report to an English fan, I went to Palace on Saturday, the players didn't move for 15 seconds. You just go, yeah, normal game, was it?
Yeah. Or in the case of West Ham last night, for 90 minutes.
We're going to come on to West Ham as a detour from the Forest story that's coming up. Holy mother of God! I mean, well played Brentford, but they were awful, really awful. But I think hats off to the Spanish PFA. I don't know what they're officially called, but because the one group of people that have been ignored in this is the players who are having to jet halfway around the world in the middle of a season, when we know for a fact that it's not good for them. It's not good for these elite athletes to be shoved into an airplane, flown around the world purely for the financial benefit and ego of the Spanish football authorities. This next story, Kieran, I think arguably could have been our headline story and possibly our only story, because it is potentially a huge one. A story that producer Guy, who's not normally given to hyperbole, says could destroy the Premier League in a matter of weeks. This controversial new salary. I mean, when producer Guy starts saying things like this could destroy the Premier League in a matter of weeks, that's when you start getting worried. That's when you think I might have to dig a cellar and start stocking up, because the rapture's on its way.
I think in defence of producer Guy here, that's actually a quote from a headline in the Times or another one of the newspapers. This new salary cap is we are back to the resurrection of anchoring, and we had this discussion quite a few months ago that could anchoring be introduced into the Premier League. And for people unfamiliar with what we mean by anchoring, is that it works as follows. You take the TV money that is generated by the club effectively finishing bottom of the Premier League. So you just focus on the TV money. So you ignore ticket sales and you ignore the money which is being generated through commercial income as well. And you multiply that by a magic number. Now, it looks as if that magic number is going to be 5. So if we take last season, it looks like that'll be around about £110 million. Multiply that by 5. So we've now got this anchor of £550 million. And that effectively becomes your wage limit, or might be wages plus amortization and so on. Now, if you actually plug those numbers into into last year's actual financial statements, most of the clubs, I think practically every club within the Premier League will be satisfied. I think Chelsea perhaps might have just been over the limit, but not significantly. So people might be saying, well, why should this be an issue? It is being driven by those clubs that are concerned that they are being left behind and there is a potential loss of competitive balance in the Premier League. Ironically, I was having a conversation with a friend a few days ago to say, if we take a look at the Premier League this season, I don't recall perhaps a more open Premier League at both the top and the end of the division for quite a few years, which I personally think is good. And so therefore, perhaps there's a case saying, and therefore it's really important that we try to preserve what we have at present. There is a fear that the growth of the Champions League concentrates power, decision-making and money in the hands of a very few number of clubs. The expansion of stadiums, the fact that some of the clubs are global brands. If you take a look at Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City, take a look at their commercial revenue, they're generating commercial revenue in excess of £300 million. Clubs like ours, we're sort of in the region of 20 to 30. So, there's that 10 times gap. So by just having sort of the anchor linked to broadcast money, it's a way of stopping the clubs at the very top getting further and further ahead. So that's the rationale behind it, and I believe Steve Parish is one of the most vocal supporters of it. I must confess, personally, I've got reservations about anchoring, but we'll set those aside. Now, the reason why some people believe it will destroy the Premier League is that if you talk to Manchester United and Manchester City and Liverpool, they don't see their rivals as being Bournemouth, Wolverhampton Wanderers, Brighton Hove Albion, Crystal Palace and so on. They see their rivals, they see their peer group as being Real Madrid, Barcelona and so on. And they say, well, why should we be restricted in terms of what we can pay in terms of wages if that's not being applied in Germany, if that's not being applied in Italy, and that's not being applied in Spain, ignoring the fact that there isn't an effective wage cap operating in Spain. They seem to have forgotten that. So they are looking at it from a global point of view, an international point of view, which is a lot of nonsense. If truth be told, because when you actually take a look at Premier League spending on wages and transfer fees, it is by far the biggest of any in the leagues. They want to be able to preserve that. The other opponents to this are the PFA, because they feel that it is a wage cap, and if there is to be a wage cap, then it has to be negotiated. What the Premier League is proposing is something that will be imposed. Now, I would imagine if I was a well-known sports lawyer with the initials NDM, I would have my bat phone on standby, because the PFA successfully recruited Nick DeMarco when the EFL tried to impose a wage cap in Leagues 1 and 2 or 3 years ago. And Nick, as you would expect him to, went through and successfully was pursued the case for the PFA. So certainly when I've spoken to the PFA, they say, we're not opposed to anything, but we're supposed to have a round table arrangement. We're supposed to be a part of the discussions, as opposed to sort of somewhat feudal approach, which is being taken by Premier League clubs. We're going to impose this, like it or lump it. There's a further issue, and I think this is, in fact, perhaps the bigger issue as far as the PFA are concerned, is that if it's adopted by the Premier League, could it therefore be adopted in the EFL Championship? Now, that would cause huge issues, because if we take a look at the TV money, the bottom club gets around about £10 million. Multiply that by 5, you've got a wage limit of 50 million. That would cause huge issues for those clubs which have just been relegated from the Premier League. And I think the PFA, A, they're concerned it's not good for their members. B, we know that the EFL are ideologically opposed to parachute payments, ignoring the fact that they have parachute payments themselves, which I've always felt is something of an inconsistency. And is this some sort of backdoor way that the EFL will use to continue their campaign to have Premier League parachute payments abolished? If you take a look at wages in the Premier League, the average wage bill is around about 140, 150 million pounds. To get that to go down from 100, it's like you're relegated on 140, Leicester were relegated on 190. To get that to go down from 140 to 50, I think would be really challenging. And Again, you have that debate. Should people have relegation clauses in contracts? They do. But what they don't have, and here I've spoken to some executives at clubs, we can persuade players to take a 25% pay cut if the club is relegated. That's about the maximum. If we say that you're going to have a 70% wage cut, they don't come to us. And that actually reduces the quality of the player in the Premier League in the first place.
This is such a big issue, Kieran, potentially. If you don't mind, can I put some things to you?
Absolutely.
So if we take the top 6 clubs, let's take Man United as an example. What would their average wage bill be annually?
Their wage bill is sort of 300 odd.
Right, so there's still a little bit of wiggle room there.
There's plenty of wiggle room at present.
Yeah.
I think what Manchester United are saying, and I understand where they're coming from. Actually, we're really good at generating commercial income, but that talent of ours is being disregarded here. And yes, we are within the limit at present, but the Premier League TV deal, that's going through to 2029. So yes, it's working in 2025, but we've got 4 years worth of wage inflation, and wage inflation in the Premier League has been very high historically. We could be bumping around in perhaps 4 years' time, and we don't know where the TV deal is going to go then. And therefore, we like the fact that is this acting as a disincentive to move to New Old Trafford, because Manchester United's matchday revenue could double from £130 million to £250 million. Well, we can't pass that through in the form of higher wages. So therefore, why bother to go ahead with the new stadium? So I can understand that criticism from Manchester United, but it's not going to destroy the Premier League. It's simply going to make things slightly more messy. At the same time, if I'm Newcastle or Aston Villa, this means that I can pay £550 million in wages. So for those clubs, the ambitious stroke and aspirational clubs, it's actually a positive. But that ignores the fact they've also got to comply with UEFA rules. So that you end up with so many sets of rules, it becomes a bit of a circus.
Let me put 3 things to you, Kieran.
Okay.
You can answer them in whatever order you want. And one of them does include the word destroy that you've just used. So first of all, for those of us not good with numbers and that, what's the difference between a magic number and a random number picked out of nowhere as the multiplier? Secondly, would I be right in saying that those top 6, 7 clubs who are talking about the Premier League being destroyed are really talking about the Premier League's ability to compete with the top clubs abroad in the Champions League? And thirdly, if you say you have reservations, Kieran, you are one of the world's leading, certainly the top 2, world's leading football finance experts. So if you have reservations, I think we'd like to hear what they are.
Okay. Magic versus random number. What I think that the supporters, the people who are very much campaigning for the anchoring system to do, is that they have put numbers into a spreadsheet, and they've said, right, I've seen it at 4.5, I've seen it at 4, I've seen it at 5, I've seen it at 6, and they say we think that would be an acceptable ultimate ceiling in terms of football investment. So it is not random. It has been stress tested. I'm not denying that.
Right. Okay.
So that's there. You're absolutely right. That those top 6 clubs, as far as the Premier League is concerned, they do see their peer group as being the other top clubs in Europe, and they don't want anything which will restrict their ability to compete with Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern and PSG, which are effectively the 4 biggest clubs. You could possibly include Juventus there, but I think Italian football has its separate problems. The reason why I've got reservations is that it's not necessarily good from a sustainability point of view, because it does potentially encourage clubs to overspend. But if these rules are going to be operating in conjunction with the squad cost rules, and it does appear we're going to be having two sets of rules that Premier League clubs are going to have to comply with. You're going to have your wages at no more than 70% or 85% of revenue, and you've got this operating, and you've also got to comply with UEFA's rules, because we've got 9 clubs in Europe, and under UEFA's rules, we've got a squad cost rule, and we've got a profit-based rule. I think we just end up with an incredibly bureaucratic system, which is providing unnecessary work for accountants. And, I'm not trying to be critical of people that work in my profession. It just seems to be over-egging the pudding, and perhaps having a more streamlined system makes more sense. So I just don't see how anchoring is going to be of any benefit. And my big reservations genuinely come from the clubs in the EFL might seize this as an opportunity to try to once again get rid of parachute payments. And I'm not a fan of parachute payments, but the rationale behind parachute payments was to allow those clubs that have been relegated to not go into administration.
Yeah.
And rightly or wrongly, that objective has been achieved.
We started this pod, Kieran, or rather I did, by referring to the old days when we used to laugh at Juventus and their financial problems. Even further back in the old days, Kieran, before you and I even met, we used to laugh at those funny foreigners sacking their coaches every 2 weeks. When good old English clubs, if somebody was sacked after 20 years, they'd say, give the man a chance. But we've seen, and I'm going to completely put aside my current animus against the owner of this particular club for this news story. I think this is a massive news story, Kieran, and I think it deserves a bit of exploration. And that's the sacking of Ange Postecoglou after 5 Premier League games he had in charge. It's a brilliant stat on Monday Night Football last night to say that at no stage did he have more than 3 days on the training pitch with all his players because of various breaks.
And they weren't his players.
Yeah. And for at least half of those, his last game, they played very well, as we mentioned on Sunday. I presume this is going to cost Forest a fair bit of money, because not only they got to get rid of his team after just a very short space of time, they've got to bring in another team, which is looking like Sean Dyche. It could well be somebody different, but they'll be bringing in a complete different team. So this is going to cost them a bit of dosh, isn't it?
Yes. So they did sack Nuno a few months ago, who ironically has now gone to West Ham, which may have saved Nottingham Forest a wee bit of money.
Yeah.
But there will have been, the chances are that when they sacked him, he will have used the services of the League Managers Association, and there would have been some sort of negotiated exit. The fact that when I was talking to one of our secret employment lawyers, he said, you do have an obligation if you are sacked, if you're effectively on some form of paid leave or however it's going to seek other jobs, and clearly Nuno has done that at West Ham, but he still would have received a settlement, as will his other members of staff. As far as Ange Postecoglou is concerned, again, he will be entitled to a settlement. And people will say, well, he's rich, he shouldn't get anything, they didn't win any matches. You sign a contract. And from what I understand, ironically, 7 days ago, he moved into an apartment in Nottingham. Well, he will have rented that out for 6 months or 12 months or whatever, along the period of leave. Well, he's got financial obligations and commitments as a result of that. So, yes, there will be substantial payments. I think it was interesting that Forest, by all accounts, were very keen on Marco Silva at Fulham, but Marco Silva has somewhere between, I think, a 12 to 15 million pound buyout clause in his contract, and Forest decided that was a reason why they wouldn't recruit him. They were also interested in recruiting Roberto Mancini, who doesn't have present employment, so therefore there wouldn't have been that cost. But I think when they did a personality profile, I think anybody that's ever worked with Roberto Mancini will confirm he's up for a scrap. I think is the Italian. I lived in Manchester for 40 years. I was living in Manchester during the Mancini era, and he was he's not backwards in coming forwards. And I think, as far as Forest were concerned, your least favourite owner, Mr. Marinakis, he's up for a scrap as well. So, in terms of personalities, you don't really want those two in a room together.
Oh, I do. I do.
15 rounds pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Okay, Chad. Today you're gonna drive the all-electric Toyota BZ.
But my electric vehicle phobia. I'm not ready, Dr. Ross.
I believe in you.
Oh my gosh. We're inside it.
Try to take deep breaths, okay?
The ventilated seats, they're touching me.
You can do this, Chad. Drive the car. How do you feel, Chad?
I feel cured. Woohoo! I'm doing it!
The all-electric BZ. One drive can change your mind. Toyota. Let's go places.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Well, I mean, it seems that one of the arguments for recruiting Sean Dyche is that he lives in Nottingham and that two of his coaches are Forest legends. So, but let me put, I want to put a couple of things to you, Kieran, if you don't mind. I'm going to do it in two blocks. I'm going to start the first block by saying I was amazed by the amount of pundits over the weekend, including last night, Gary O'Neill on Monday Night Football, who's not unused to being sacked at short notice himself, but saying he's absolutely not surprised by this because we've reached a stage in English football where staying in the Premier League is so important that you will do whatever it takes, which leads me on to my first set of questions for you. Forest spent a lot of money over the summer, an awful lot of money over the summer. I have to say, players, I think they spent their money wisely. I think they bought some really good young players. The fact that neither of the managers saw fit to put, I mean, they've barely played a minute, the four most expensive players. So they spent a lot of money in the summer. I know they would have sold players. They've got rid of two managers already, which means they brought two managers in. The chances are, in January, they're going to spend a lot more money in the transfer market. And the chances are in February, if they're still in the bottom four, they might sack whoever the new manager is and bring another one in. So that's a lot of money to spend. So my first question is, how does that look PSR-wise? What sort of impact is that going to have? Because to an outsider, it seems there's going to be an inevitable impact. And secondly, if you argue that staying in the Premier League earns you another £130 million, does there not come a stage where it's actually cheaper to get relegated? Because if you're spending £130 million on players and managers to keep you up, I don't get the financial logic there. But so obviously I'm an outsider, so I'd be interested to hear what your views are on both of those. I mean, and obviously you're going to stay in the Premier League, whatever it takes, you're going to stay in the Premier League. I get that. But when it seems to be a false economy if you're spending twice as much as it will make you in the Premier League to stay in it.
Well, I think you raise a very valid point here. I've been doing a few seminars, talks. So I've done 2 days with the Belgian football authorities. We were in Northern Ireland. After our gig, I was also working with the Irish FA, and this was one of the areas that I raised. And last night I was at Prenton Park doing exactly the same for Tranmere Rovers, and the concept of casino management of football clubs is, I think, a relevant one. And one of the questions I was asked, which is why do so many clubs choose to lose money? And that's what they've done. They choose to lose money because it's the football club that offers the contracts to players. It's the football club that agrees the transfer fees and the subsequent amortization and so on. And the reason for this is because I think, just sort of answering your final question, the financial benefits are deemed to be greater than the costs if we get another 2 or 3 years. The concern is not that you get relegated. Getting relegated does cause problems. It's doing a Forest or doing a Leeds. You think about when Leeds were relegated in, 2003? It took them 16 years to get back up. If you think about when Forest were relegated from the Premier League, it took them a long period of time to return. And during that period, you're still losing 400 or 500 grand a week in the Championship, but you're not getting any of the sort of the soft benefits of being a Premier League club, such as we're hosting Manchester United, we're hosting Liverpool, we're getting the world's cameras, we're getting all of that attention. And that's what the owners crave. It's not just the football, it's the fact that we saw that match between Forest and Chelsea, that the cameras kept panning across to Marinakis and then, he's gone. And that became a story. And I'll be honest, these people have got huge egos and they like that degree of attention. So it's normally deemed to be worth twisting on 19. That's how I describe it. If ever you play blackjack, logic would tell me don't twist on 19. But you get to the January window and the coach comes, and let's say, Sean Dyche, I believe, has been appointed. Sean Dyche goes to Edu, goes to Marinakis and says, I know that Edu, you are the director of football, but this lad is a Sean Dyche type of player. Sign him for £20 million, put him on 70 grand a week. I've spoken to his agent. He'll take a 10 grand pay cut if we're relegated. And then a decision has to be made. And when I've spoken to executives at clubs, they say the head says no, the heart says go. And they end up making those decisions because it gets overtaken by ego, if it gets overtaken by adrenaline, and they end up spending this money. So I think it is an issue. With regards to Forest spending, again, it comes back to the fact that they appointed a director of football who by all accounts, didn't get on with Nuno. And he presumably didn't get on particularly well with Ange. And my concern here is, I'm looking at it from Forest's point of view. I don't know what Forest's style of football is, and I don't think the players know what it is. And having to change some things now, it could work. And I also think that those people who are critics of Sean Dyche do it because of his haircut, do it because he looks like a bouncer, do it because of his accent. He's actually a very progressive coach. But if you take a look at Burnley, they were very good at set pieces, very good at their drills as far as the defence is concerned. Should that be the priority for Forest? That seems to be inconsistent with one of the criticisms that was levelled at Nuno, was that he didn't play attacking football.
Again, there was a brilliant stat on Match the Day on Saturday night, which is they compared the managers that were in the frame at the time, and Sean Dyche's possession stats were almost exactly the same as Nuno's, and the amount of passes to get the ball forward almost exactly the same as Nuno's. So you can see the logic there. But you mentioned come January, Sean Dyche going to Edu and saying, these are the sort of players I need. That won't be happening in January. That'll be happening now. Sean Dyche from today, and I'm not suggesting anyone's being tapped up, but Sean Dyche will be saying, look, it's only 3 months to the January window. These are the players I like, which means that Postecoglou would have been doing the same thing just last week. So yes. Forest will have gone in the space of a week from looking for attack-minded high presses to low block, older. And again, Sean Dyche will be attracted to older players, which has a knock-on effect. This was an issue with Palace, with Roy Hodgson and Steve Parish, I understand. Roy Hodgson looking for 28, 29-year-olds with experience. Steve Parish looking for 22, 23-year-olds that you can make a profit on. So I would be interested. I mean, just in terms of Forest will have to be aware now of PSR, surely, won't they? With this amount of money going out, will it have an impact on their PSR thinking?
I suspect it will be make a decision now, sort out PSR later.
All right.
Because football is driven by short-term self-interest.
Yeah.
And you've got to be seen to be backing the manager.
All right. Well, let me come to the second thing I want to discuss. That phrase, casino management, is a great phrase. But experience is beginning to tell us it doesn't work. So take West Ham Brentford last night as an example. And already, I know, mate of mine's a West Ham fan, already people were leaving saying, this is not working, Nuno's not working, this is a disaster, we need somebody else. But at the start of the season, and we're not a football pod, so we didn't discuss this on the pod, but I discussed it elsewhere, I was worried about Brentford. I thought they've lost two brilliant strikers, they've lost a manager who's done a fantastic job keeping them up. It seemed to me that if any of the promoted teams were going to stay up, Brentford were one of the teams that were possibly in danger. But Brentford recruited from within, recruited a non-sexy choice, if you like. There probably would have been eyebrows raised by Brentford fans. And here they are playing West Ham off the pitch last night and sitting comfortably mid-table, which is where they would be under Thomas Frank, I'm guessing. So why is it that so many other clubs are going, right, okay, we need a high-profile manager, we need to throw as much money as we can at this, when Brentford, what is it that Brentford are doing differently and having a better result?
That's my 99 coming back. It comes down to culture.
Right. Is it as simple as that?
Brentford have a culture. They have a strategy. That comes from the top.
Right.
And that culture is one of development, of one of nurture, of one of having faith. Because where did Thomas Frank come from? He came from Brentford.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you are familiar with the systems, if you look at how Brentford have recruited, and they have recruited well this summer, yes, they've lost two very good strikers, but they lost Tony 12 months prior to that.
Yeah, fair point.
And they didn't even blink.
Yeah.
They just... and I'm a huge admirer of Brentford, and I don't think that they get enough credit for what they have achieved since arriving in the Premier League, because they play good football as well. You know, it's not it's not attritional football. They play good football as well. They know their style. They know that if player X, Y, or Z leaves, they've already worked out players of that same style. When they recruit a coach who will not have to change the style. So we talk about a Sean Dyche style of football, a Big Ange type of football, a Steve Cooper type of football, a Nuno type of football. And those are all quite seismic changes at Nottingham Forest. I don't know who Brentford's next manager is going to be, and it could be that we could be having this conversation in 6 or 7 years and Keith Andrews is still there. But I do know that person will be recruited to maintain the status quo, because this is the Brentford way of doing things. And that has benefits, I think, especially for a club of the size. And I'll be honest, it's not that dissimilar to what Brighton do. Yeah. They recruit the coach to employ the style of football. And yes, there will be slight changes, or if there is going to be a change, that will be a change that they will have dealt with as far as their last 2 or 3 windows is concerned. So it is a cultural issue. That culture is ultimately set at the top, and Matthew Benham is a very analytical owner, whereas, again, appreciate you not being a fan of him. There are many words that could be used to describe Marinakis. I've heard you use quite a few of them. Analytical is not one of them.
Yeah.
He's more emotional.
Yeah. Although the word analytical does start with some letters that have similar to how I've described Yeah, I'm glad to finish this discussion, Kieran, and I really wanted to explore this a little bit further than perhaps we have time to normally, because I just think it's a really interesting issue. It's just casino management doesn't. Well, but I'm glad you mentioned the fact that we're not a football pub. But I'm glad you mentioned the fact that Brentford play good football, because last night it would have been really easy for Keith Andrews to pull up the hatches, say, "Look, we'll stay up," but that wasn't staying up football last night. And what I was impressed by was that they took 15 minutes. They had a look at West Ham. West Ham started brightly. And then they thought, well, hang on, we're a better team than they are. And then for the rest of the game, they could have had 5 or 6 or 7. Yeah. The last 3 stories are slightly smaller, Kieran, but they're important in their own right. First of all, I imagine you've made some space on the top step of your stairs for Dundee United, Kieran.
Yes, congratulations. The first club to bring out a full set of counts for 2024, 2025. We'll be talking about Celtic in a little while. And it shows that clubs can do this quickly. Also, I think they deserve some significant congratulations, because they've reduced their losses by 90% from 2.3 million to 260k. Yes, that's a function partly of promotion and so on, but their wages are well under control. It does, for me, this is a club which has done it. And we talk about the Premier League and all of the activities of the Premier League. Dundee United, in the top division of Scottish football, spent £76,000 buying players.
76,000?
76,000, yeah.
Holy well, there are signs, Kieran, just little signs that the Scottish Premier League may be more competitive in the next 2 or 3 seasons. Well, you only have to look at the table now and see the way Dundee played against Celtic on Sunday. Celtic have also published, and it seems a shame, Kieran, that we can't just go, we've done Dundee United. Let's not bring in one of the big 2, but we have to, because Celtic have published their accounts. Are they equally as impressive?
They are spectacular. The highest revenues in Scottish football history, £144 million. That compares to £10 million for Dundee United. Now, these are not the full accounts. This is a potted list, and this is where I get a bit twitchy when clubs report what they want you to see. And as I always say, I'll be completely transparent. I'm a shareholder in Celtic.
Yeah,
share price has gone up 70% since I bought my shares. I'm sitting pretty.
Yeah.
So I'm more than happy, but I'm not a Celtic fan. So I'm looking at it through a completely different lens. Record pre-tax profit. Their profits were £46 million. Those profits that would take Dundee United 4.5 years to earn in total revenue.
Wow.
So this is just how successful they've been. They're sitting on £77 million in cash in the bank. And Brendan Rodgers has come out and said, "I'm trying to run this club as running a Honda Civic." Well, if you've got £77 million of cash, if you've got a squad which has cost 10 times that of your opponents, and I did an analysis of this simply because, following those comments, a couple of fans, ironically, one of whom was from Celtic, said, "Is he talking a load of old cobblers?" And this was following the loss to Dundee, which is the first time, I believe, since 1987. And yet the numbers simply just didn't stack up. They had such an advantage. For every £1 that I think Dundee were paying in wages, Celtic are paying 18. So it's absolutely crazy differences. And they still manage. So I think here the manager is trying to deflect from criticism, which possibly should be coming his way. I'm not saying it should. Again, there's a football discussion to be had. And I've made myself unpopular with Celtic fans. You can be critical of a club, or you can make observations of a club. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are pro that club or anti that club, but such is the tribal nature of Scottish football. I seem to upset a few Celtic fans. And yet you look at what they talk about the club and the fact that there was actually a boycott of the club.
Yeah.
And I was asked to comment on the weekend that they are potentially going to go down the not to buy merchandise, not to spend money on catering. And my observation is that if you don't buy a few shirts and they've got £77 million in the bank, it's going to take a long, long time before that takes any effect.
Well, there was a demonstration behind the goal with the Celtic fans on Sunday, and the fact is, thank God, one of the beauties of football is that despite that £18 to £1 difference, Dundee were the better team on the day. It's as simple as that, and that's Brendan Rodgers needs to confront that simple reality as well. I don't know how many Salford City fans we have, Kieran. This is our final story, but it's almost it's almost quite. It's, the way producer guy's written it's almost quite poignant. Saw the class of '92, Kieran, dwindling, shall we say, dwindling. That's Salford.
Yes. This came through from Company's House. My little pinging machine went pinging crazy because Nicky Butt, Ryan Giggs and Phil Neville have all ceased to be directors. Now, we knew that they were pulling out as shareholders. We didn't know whether their role would continue. Paul Scholes had quit as a director some time earlier. So it's now only Gary Neville who is a director. I believe that David Beckham is a shareholder, but he's not a director. So yes, I think the class of '92 experiment, as far as their involvement in Salford City is concerned, has now ceased. I was on the overlap with Paul Scholes and Gary Neville a few months ago, and listening to them talking about what's happened at Salford, I think was interesting, and I think they do deserve plaudits. I think they initially went in and they say, we'll each put in a couple of $100,000 into this. It has cost them more than that, and they've walked away, and they've not disadvantaged the club. I believe that Salford City are going to move back to playing in orange as opposed to red. Which for me, of course, are exactly the same colour. So I suspect I won't notice much of a difference. But there do appear to be a few changes afoot at that club, though I think they're having quite a good season in League Two at present.
I have to say, Kieran, that Brentford away kit, it did occur to me watching West Ham Brentford last night. That's probably how football looks for you almost all the time,
yes.
Really. And again, we should take it more seriously than I do. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you will get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and much, much more. You can do that by going to priceoffootball.com and clicking on Join the Club, and you can sign up today. It'd be lovely to see you. Won't be that long until our next meeting, Kieran, will it? Our next Zoom Q&A meeting, which is always fun. I'll probably have a Christmas quiz. Let's have a Christmas quiz.
Oh, we will have a Christmas.
We'll have a Christmas quiz. Great. We should. That's what we should do. We should do a Price of Football Christmas jumper. Like a lot of people been sending you pictures of that. Keep calm and spreadsheet.
Yes.
If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and find us on YouTube, and go back to priceoffootball.com if you want to buy our book. Or a T-shirt. We will be back on Tuesday with our next questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Just a quick reminder that we are doing a benefit gig for Samaritans at the Amex Stadium on Wednesday, the 19th of November. We're in negotiations, just trying to get some other people to come up on stage with us. And we're really looking forward to that. It's a very good initiative by the Premier League, and give it huge credit for the good work that they do. And people might say, I'm praising the Premier League too much. No, you give credit where credit is due, and you give criticism where it's due. That's what life should be like, and that applies to us as well. So for all of those that say the kind words to us, absolutely. For all of those that criticise it, we take it on board. We're always trying to improve the show, and we are far from perfect. So thank you very much for that as well. There's another way that you can support the show. We appreciate that people don't have a lot of spare cash, but if you want to support us another way, you could give us a review. You could go onto that app, and it will just take you 30 seconds, but it does make a difference to us in terms of where we stand in terms of algorithms and tables and so on. Doesn't matter what you say. You would rather have the show presented by Big Ange and Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. Big Ange's was last seen on a flight back to Australia, and he could team up with Skippy, and they could rescue people with just a few clicks.
Skippy's quite judgmental.
Yes, that's true.
That's all you get out of it is. That's such an unlikely. What's that? It's even worse with Flipper. I mean, you could kind of understand how Skippy was rudimentarily communicating, especially in Australia in the 60s. I don't think it was that difficult. But how Flipper was supposed to work, I don't know. I need to point out, you say we take the criticism on board. You take the criticism on board, Kieran. I sulk like a 4-year-old. Basically, I'm not big with the criticism. I deal with criticism by avoiding it wherever possible, and when discovering it, just go, well, find yourself another pod then. Knowing full well that they can't. So, ha ha ha. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.